So today we're having a C-Suite insider conversation with David Dann, who's the CEO of BDA, and they basically go out and help hospitals and large medical groups or medium-sized medical groups, even physician practices, find money that they've been leaving on the table in not billing correctly to provide to insurance companies and CMS and those kinds of things. And so we were introduced by a common friend, John Renz, and it turns out that we ended up liking each other as people. We like each other's mission of what we're trying to do and help each other, but more important, we like how we do business. We tend to also have the same kind of clients. And, for instance, if I'm speaking with somebody about what we do, with either MedCV or contact intelligence, then we also end up talking about obviously physicians and compensation, and then revenue and optimizing and making sure the doctors are successful in their practices and they're joining us and those kinds of things. So, and then last Friday, actually, Dave and I were talking, and one of the things we're doing with MedCV, obviously, is we want to educate physicians. So it's educating physicians that are in practice, but also medical students and residents and fellows. And you've been doing this a while, right, David? So it's been you have some inside information that that people need to know about. And that's basically what we're trying to do here, is just talk about that. So
Sure.
what would you advise and talk to a young doctor about today?
I think the main challenge right now, and you and I were talking about this last week, is how you position yourself, particularly as a young practitioner coming out, to work in a fairly complicated environment. Doctors, when I first started this, really pretty much just didn't know anything about documentation and coding. They were given maybe 5 minutes overview from someone, and then they're kind of thrown into the fire. And in recent years, even with the advent of electronic medical records and electronic health records, what we've really seen is maybe more confusion than we would have expected. And I think the reason is because the EHRs are great, and we work with a variety of EHRs, and they're all excellent. The real key is how do they utilize them in a way to optimize their own documentation capture. And I'll give you an example. We were talking just yesterday to a practice in Kentucky, and that practice has like 20, 25 practitioners. And we learned that the doctors don't code. The coders code, which is really, number one, a compliance issue. But even more importantly, they didn't have any orientation to how to document each visit and what they did. And so what happens is their revenue capture becomes very small in comparison to what they've actually done, because even the coders cannot be clairvoyant. They have to only code that
Surprise.
Now. And we got a few chuckles out of that with people in Kentucky yesterday. Was okay. Well, we know you're not clairvoyant, so how about we work up and down the revenue cycle and orient people a little bit to better medical documentation, and from that, then the coding training that goes along with it. Those are really somewhat they're very intertwined, but in some ways they're kind of mutually exclusive. The documentation has to be accurate on an EHR. And so when it recommends a level of service, if it doesn't have everything in there, it's going to document a lower level of service. So that's one of the places that we focused on.
Very tight connection between revenue and collections that that's the money that you pay the bills with, including physicians' compensation, right? And
Right.
support staff and building and everything else. So you mentioned on Friday, I think when we're talking, the concept of being a good steward, of even if you're an employed physician, you know, you really need to, you're in charge of the clinical healthcare of that patient when you're an employee, or if you're not employed, if you have your own practice, but you are really also responsible for the financial health of your practice and your group and your health system if you work for that as well. So what are some of the things that you had conversations with the C-suite where you guys have sat down, had lunch, kind of like what we're doing here, except we're not eating, but where you and the CEO, that you just found several millions of dollars in opportunity that they're leaving behind the table, that, what do they talk about as it relates to, I wish if I was a CEO of a health system, for instance, I wish my doctors could do this or had these resources or would do better on that. What is that conversation? And what would they do if they found that, if they did better? What would they do with the money?
Okay. I have a real life example. I actually was on a conversation last week with the CEO of a critical access hospital. I have a real life example. I actually was on a conversation last week with the CEO of a critical access hospital in the Panhandle of Florida. So you know that area pretty well.
Yeah.
And he is responsible.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
You probably do. And up
we can
and
talk
down,
about that one later.
going over to Alabama as well, but all up and down that area. And he has responsibility for multiple hospitals. And we got talking about his practitioners and said, we just made a transition to an EHR, but I don't see it moving the right direction. I said, well, there's really two issues. Like, first of all, how much of your business is fee for service and how much of your business is value-based? And they're starting to see an increase in value-based reimbursement, which would be Medicare Advantage, ACOs, things of that nature. So you really have a couple birds to kill, I told him, is you have to capture diagnoses accurately, which drive what we call hierarchical condition coding, or HCCs. And that ultimately affects what's called risk adjustment factors, which is a multiplier on a value. So you want to get their risk adjustment factors over 1. You talk to most CEOs and they'll tell you they're not over 1 on average. So that's one aspect, is how, knowing that the world's moving from fee for service to value-based reimbursement, how do you position yourself to kind of play in both sides of the street? So what we really try to do is make certain we kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We tell him that, 1, we want to make sure that you're positioning and you're accurate and you're optimizing the documentation associated with diagnoses. And a quick example there is, patient comes in, they're diabetic, but they came in for something different. Well, if they don't document sometime that year that they're treating the diabetes, then what will happen is they'll lose that value in the risk adjustment. So that's a real life example of how it can adversely impact if you don't have an awareness and acuity of listening, looking and listening for that. On the fee for service side, the evaluation management codes changed for the first time since 1997 on January 1st of this year. And that changed the game. And as most things happen with the government, it didn't simplify things as they predicted it would. So what happened was it got a little more complicated, and there's a lot of confusion. And we're seeing a lot of our existing clients, as well as new ones that we do these free preliminary analyses for, going backwards on their evaluation and management levels. So there has to be, even though the EHRs have addressed the new guidelines and been pretty effective at it, the documentation going into it is not necessarily driving the levels. So what we're really wanting to do is focus people on the fact that you're playing in 2 camps. You're playing fee for service and you're playing value-based. We've been doing the fee for service since 1988. The value-based has just been in recent years. And people have different people that manage that. They usually have a population health group that's doing the value-based stuff. And then they've got HIM or someone that's doing the fee for service. But sometimes they're not necessarily communicating. And one of the issues you run into with hospitals is that, and I worked in a hospital, so I'm not throwing stones, but they tend to work in silos. And it's tough to sometimes get people to go cross-directional through those silos and facilitate the proper communication. So we work really hard at getting that communication optimized between those silos and making certain that we're addressing all things that need to be addressed on medical documentation. And then, of course, get into the nitty-gritty of training their coders, people up and down the rev cycle on how to properly code, which is obviously a different skill. And most people have certified coders. And the value that somebody like our company brings to them is we've been all around the country. We see different markets. We see a different interpretation from different payers. So it allows us to share that knowledge and apply it in their situation. We have a large system that you would know in Florida, that there's about 300 practitioners we work with. And we've got people that have 5 to 10 to 20 doctors. The interesting thing to me is the level of sophistication varies widely. Sometimes it's not as you would predict it to be. So what we really want people to understand is that, yes, it's a complex environment. It's not exactly cocktail discussion stuff. Most people get bored real quick. And our idea is to make the complex as simple as we can and lay out an action plan timeline and address some of the nuances that are associated with it.
So with regard to the physicians themselves, and I'm getting an echo a little bit.
Not hearing it here.
What are the things that you would recommend if I was first, if I'm a physician, what do I need to know? Do I need to go become a coding expert? No, right? But what do I need to know, or what do I need to monitor to make sure that my financial health is optimized, right? Because whether I'm an employee or not, it's work RVU connected, but if my collections and coding isn't correct, it has an impact. It will come back and have an impact if you don't do it right.
Right.
Sooner or later.
Right. Let me give you, it used to be, and I haven't seen the latest study, but on average, most hospital owned practices lose approximately $150,000 per year. Per doctor.
That's employed. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And there's multiple reasons that that's occurring, but part of it's not aligning the incentives. I can remember, I'm old enough to remember when there was the price wars going out there trying to lure doctors into systems, and they ended up being upside down on most of those practitioners. And in most, if not most cases, they're still upside down on most practitioners if they're employed. So what we try to do is advise them on how it can impact their incentive program. How it can, in fact, if they're on work RVUs or if they have a different modification, there's a lot of consultants out there that are compensation experts and incentive program experts. And we're familiar with most of those programs. We don't try to feed that. That's really not what we're here to do. But what we do want to do is be cognizant of what their hot buttons are, what's their interest level.
Yeah.
And I think the very first thing is you want them to be compliant. And the number one fear of any practitioner is being audited for compliance issues. So we try to create a consistent evaluation and management policy and procedure. And what that then does is it works in concert with the compliance people if they have them. Sometimes we're the compliance program, but we can do it either way. And the concept there is to make certain that we're all singing off the same song sheet. And that knowing that they're compliant is very, very important to the doctors, because when they come out, particularly the young doctors, they're told, code everything at 3 because then you'll never be audited and you're never going to have an OIG audit. And the reality is you can get audited because you're undercoding. They look for certain norms within specialties and things of that nature. So they're not the enemy. They're simply trying to enforce the rules. So what we really want to do is make sure that they're following the rules and that they're well within the boundaries. But at the same time, we don't want them to bill a penny more or a penny less than what they deserve. And that's really the importance, is to instill in them I bring value to my organization. They hired me into this organization because they felt I was really good at what I do. I would add value, and also that I can help the practice be vibrant financially. Because most physicians will always tell you that their practice is understaffed. You hear that all the time, right?
Yeah.
Of course, we're hearing that now for different reasons. That post-COVID, we can't find enough. No. But even before that, if you want to have optimal staffing to do your job the best way you can do it as a practitioner, then you need to do your job in making sure the cash flow is there for your hospital or your own practice unit to employ enough people to do the quality work that you feel needs to be done to create great quality care and to represent you professionally in an optimal way. So I think we're tuned to that. So I think that's the best way I could answer that question.
It reminds me of I was brought in to help a health system build a network of physicians, and then also decide if this was years ago, but decide if we wanted to be in the physician employment business or not. And of the 700 physicians that were on the medical staff, 19 had been employed, but no one could tell us if they're making money or losing money on these guys, or if we should even do this, or what they wanted to be when they grow up. And of those, there were 19 employed doctors out of the 700, and we had 17 different compensation models. And and people were happy with whatever they had. And so one of my responsibilities was to figure out, well, maybe we should reevaluate our comp model and come up with something that's durable, reliable, and consistent and fair to them and to the organization. Yeah. And so you can imagine when you first get the whiff out about, hey, we're going to change your compensation model, people are generally very skeptical, like, oh, you're going to get me, right? Yeah. And I remember I went to one physician's office and he was one of the key docs in the group, and we started the meeting like this. So Niels, why are you here? I know you're here to talk about compensation. Yeah. And I said, well, I ran the numbers, and this is what you made last year, and this is the way it would be under your new comp model, but you just have to bill for you being a doctor, because you're underbilling by a lot. You're doing things that are physician visits that you're billing nurse visits for. It's just not fair to you. You're the doctor. And I said, if we did the same volume and billed correctly next year, not overbilling and not underbilling, you would have netted after tax about $26,000 in your pocket. Yeah. Yeah. So the meeting went from this to, really, you hungry? Niels, let's go eat.
That's great example, because they all definitely want to feel. I think there's a value that needs to be reached, and you need to feel you're adding value. But one of the things we do is run evaluation management curves against our own proprietary database, because the old database is now outdated, right? Because everything 2020 isn't applicable. So we created our own database till the new, we've got a year or two under our belt to see really what's happening. And we can show them that this is where you're coding. This is how much, quote, money is on the table if you code it at the levels that we see on average. And in most cases, that's 10 to 15% improvement on net revenue. And that is net after adjustments to revenue. So most of them are leaving that much on the table. Well, that'll turn you from a red number to a black number, right?
Well, not only that, the contribution margin on that 10 or 15% goes straight to the bottom line. It does. Right? I mean, that's cash in the bank.
Yeah, that's
right off the bat.
That's what the CFOs call incremental revenue, and and everybody loves incremental revenue. So yeah, it's basically just falling through the bottom. There's no additional overhead. You're just billing for what you should be billing. The other thing is to not only compare yourself against yourself quarter to quarter, but but we can lay it out by specialty against their peers. Now, one thing that most practitioners really like to know is, how do I compare against my peers?
Yeah.
Peer review is a big deal, as you know. You've been in this business a while. And if we can show them that, that means a lot. What? What do you mean? Why am I here and they're there? Well, because when we did some chart reviews, we're seeing that these issues, and you'll go through that with them and use it more as a training device, not as a punitive device.
Right.
So if we change a few things, we can move you to where your peers are and still have you be compliant. So yeah, that is sort of a hot button in what motivates you. So we talk about money, incentives, but I also think practitioners are very motivated by doing it right.
Yeah.
You know that we're doing it as well as their peers, and that's something that we do monitor.
Well, I think, just, doing well in high school to be able to get into college, to be able to get accepted to medical school. Yeah. Their whole life has been competitive. And so I remember we do the same thing. I'd have a monthly comp report meeting, and nobody wanted to be at the bottom of the list. In the beginning, it was because there were some issues that had to be resolved, right? So there were big differences between star players and those at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as compensation. After a while, we raised the tide for everyone, but still, overall tide was better for everyone, but still somebody had to be the worst of the best.
Yep.
And they didn't like that either, and then then we started getting into the nitty gritty, and it became fun to have a conversation with them. It's like, hey, listen, I'm better than, Bill. What the heck, Niels, you got any ideas? It's like, well, yeah, maybe less windshield time going to the hospital, admit more through the hospitalist and you make more money, or something else, So
Yeah.
it becomes, if you do it right, they become friends, and
yeah, I agree.
Friends help each other out.
They do. And the thing that's most gratifying to our regional directors who are, certified coders, is that the practitioners are asking, when's BDA going to be back out again? And originally, like, oh my gosh, you're going to make me meet with them again. So it's cool when it turns to, hey, we're looking forward to their visit. And one of the things that we do is create a scoring system in compliance with their own compliance people, where you do chart reviews, and if they score, accuracy of over, say, 80%, they don't have to do as many. They don't have to do it quarterly. Maybe they do it twice a year. Maybe it's every 3 months or every 9 months. So there's different benchmarks that people will use within their systems for how often there are chart reviews. Funny, some of the ones that do it the best, that should only be once a year, still are asking for it quarterly. So when we do it, we're happy to do it, but that's just a different way of looking at incentives. That, as you mentioned, different ways that they may find themselves motivated to do it accurately. And like I said, and I were talking Friday, the hierarchical condition coding, and we have that product we call HCC Reclaim that allows us to look at historical claims, and we can then tell by specialty, by practitioner, and by patients within that practitioner's office how well they're capturing those, and then go back and train. So it's just putting the right tools in front of them for them to simply be given credit for that which they're already doing. We're not asking them to work harder. We just work smarter. And and most practitioners are very attuned to doing that. And particularly now that telephonic medicine has become a lot bigger issue. That has been, the coding for it's different, but also just what they need to address, because they're able to touch the patient. They're not able to, you don't have that same relationship you do in the doctor's office. So trying to be attuned to the fact that COVID sort of changed the world, and it's kind of gradually going back, but it's never going to be the way it was before. And so being aware of that, so that our training acknowledges that the practice of medicine has changed significantly, and therefore how do we address what they do to one, capture the revenue but we also want to be compliant and optimize the doctor-patient relationship, because that's really the central thing that at the end of the day, what you're really wanting to do is facilitate that so that they don't feel encumbered or nervous or worried about what am I doing wrong, but more so I know I'm doing it right, and they can then focus, David Dann, the patient coming in versus, I wonder if he's a level 3 or 4 today. So,
right. What would you advise if I'm a new graduating fellow or a resident getting into practice? What are the top 2 things that I should look for? Going in and joining a group or setting up my own practice that I need to make sure that I'm tracking on. And then if there's those KPIs or those metrics aren't what you think they should be, what would you recommend they do? I mean, who should they talk to? What approach should they have? Where do they get some backup to prove, hey, we could be doing better, and here's some ideas of how to do it. And how would you advise someone to figure out there might be a problem or an opportunity, and then what to do about it?
Well, I think, and KPIs, the first thing most practitioners look at is how many patients did I see? And I'm not sure that that's necessarily a wonderful way of looking at it. And, there are people that are more productive than others. There are doctors that are faster and slower. But the thing that sometimes gets missed on that is the acuity of patients may be totally different. You may have been dealt the hand of a bunch of old guys like David Dann. He's going to take more time than a young guy like Niels there. So, it's really, I think, focusing for them on when I come into that practice, what kind of tools are they making available to me so that I can be efficient and make certain I don't leave money on the table, that I'm compliant, but it's easy. So I don't want to go to coding school. I'm a smart guy, but I really don't want to go to coding school. I just want to be given the tools to make it easy. And so I think that thing I would ask, if I were a young practitioner coming out, is, okay, so what is your training program? When you bring people on, what do you have as far as medical documentation and coding training? What do you use? What EHR do you use? How do you use it? Is there somebody training me on how to use it? And is there somebody making sure I document everything I should? Because I want to do a good job for you guys, and I want to pay for myself. So I think that I would be looking at what systems do they have in place that are going to make my job as a practitioner easier, so I can really focus on patient care, but at the same time know that I'm attuned to the fact that there are some people in the financial side that are looking at the numbers, and instead of that being the enemy, which oftentimes there's always this us against them thing that can occur. It's, well, wait a minute, we're all in this together, aren't we? We're all in this at the end of the day to provide great patient care. And at the same time, we want to be a profitable practice. So I think I would want to know what their culture is on that and ask those kind of questions.
Well, I think that was some good advice for young doctors and I think practicing physicians as well. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of times where people just are so focused on the clinical side and seeing the volume of patients, and then take the eye off of the financial health of the practice and the optimizing of things, and that's sometimes real money, real fast, with small adjustments that you can have. It could mean you pay for that 1 year of college tuition for your teenager, by just doing something just a little bit better or smarter.
Well, every practitioner out there comes out with a lot of debt. And my son has a couple friends of his that are doctors. One is an anesthesiologist. And when I heard what his debt load was, it was like, oh, he's going to be working until he's 90, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But, it's staggering. And so they need to have a plan on, okay, what's my financial plan? how am I going to reduce my debt that I had to get my degree? Because I went to school an awful lot of my life, most of my life at this point, right?
Right.
And so if I can do the things right that affect the finances of that practice, it's going to accelerate my ability to reduce my debt load that I brought with me from my education. And that's that's a big mountain to climb for a lot of these practitioners, particularly the specialists, that go on, the fellows. When you look at how much money it costs to get that, the return on investment can be a ways down the road. And if we can help them with that and be aware of that, I think that management in the practices and the hospitals, while they're aware, they need to probably be verbally aware of that. And I understand, hey, we know you got $500,000 of debt or whatever it may be. And if you do this, and this, in 10 years, you're going to be right side up and everything will be gravy after that. So, and you do that, Niels, with your background and the things you do with the programs you offer, is to really be attuned to some of the pain points that they have. I think understanding each other's pain points is a big deal. They have pain points just as the practice has pain points, and the CEOs have pain points. But they all align at the end of the day. And I think it's getting everybody to understand that we're all aligned in the same thing. And how do we still address each other's pain points at the same time?
Yeah. Well, I think that's why you and I became friends in the first place, right? Because we've had these conversations around our own businesses, and I thought it'd be really valuable for you to be able to share some of the several years of maneuvering the landmines that you have, to share with some of the folks that watch this, from the C-suite of a hospital to graduating residents and fellows and even medical students, to kind of be prepared. I think a key takeaway for me from this too is that if you do the right thing and you do the smart thing, then you're going to be aligned with the people that are there to help. And so from my perspective, I've been fortunate enough to work for health systems in the past where the hospital administration were really the cheerleaders of the medical staff. They got it, because I've met people where if you're the CEO of a hospital, they think that the patients are their clients. Where it should be that your physicians on your medical staff, they should be your clients, and the patients are really the physician's clients. And if you have that mindset and you are there to help, truly help, physicians see that pretty quickly, right? And then they want to be part of the solution, right? And if they're not, if you do everything in your power to do the right thing, bonum non malice, good not evil, right? Then good people will want to be part of that. And you'll also call out those that don't.
Yeah.
And then I've had, doesn't happen often, but I've had a few occasions where I've encouraged those physicians to go work for our competition.
Yeah.
Which is good for us, so it's not a bad thing. Not everybody's great, but we want to make it as good as possible with the right people on the team. We want to be a winning team that do this together, the whole team, to take care of the needs of the community.
Great.
And I feel that with you and what you do, your primary mission is to go help. And the natural byproduct is that you get paid fairly by helping them make money by finding things that they have left on the table. And that's not just for hospitals and health systems and medical groups, but the doctors as well, and educating them. So thanks for taking the time to share some of these insider, conversations, the kind of stuff that we would do, if we're breaking bread together, right? Or playing golf together, we'd be having these conversations.
Absolutely.
So thanks, David.
I appreciate it very much, Niels. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.